Hey, I'm your host, Marissa Panay. Welcome to Your Brand is Showing, the podcast for service providers who are tired of blending in and wondering why no matter how much you market your business, you're still not attracting the clients you want. Spoiler, it all comes back to your brand. So let's make sure your brand is saying the right thing to the right people so you can finally create content that truly connects. You are making showing up for your business so much harder than it needs to be. All you really need to do is know your values, your mission, and what you're here to do, which is serving your audience, right? The reason you are creating social media content, the reason you are putting content on your website, the reason you are doing anything that you are doing for your brand is to serve your audience into getting them closer to making a decision, whether that decision is to reach out to you for help, whether that decision is to visit your shop, whether that is to purchase your products or services. Like, all you're doing is fostering trust and building relationships and trying to just bridge the gap between stranger and customer. That's all you're doing with your content, is you're helping bridge the connection to get them from point A to point B. So if you can gut check whether you are putting out is like in alignment with those core things of values, mission, and serving your audience, because that's what it all comes back to, then it really doesn't matter if it's the most mind-blowing thing. It just matters that it's communicating what you're here to do. And that, again, is to serve your audience. So today I'm going to show you a little bit how to make showing up simpler. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a real life case study on how I actually help a local networking group, basically taking their original concept and then helping them make it easier to show up because they were making it much more complicated than it needs to be. And what do I mean by saying like you're making it harder than it needs to be? Well, there's three typical things that happen. One, you're either in like perfection paralysis or analysis paralysis, and you're just thinking every piece of content needs to be groundbreaking. You need to be sharing this like mind-boggling insight that no one else has ever thought of before, or it has to be the most beautiful work of art. Or number two is overthinking your strategy. So you're trying to engineer every post to hit just right instead of just focusing on sharing your message. We're not just posting to hit a post count. We're posting to communicate our message to our audience. And what's the most effective way to share our message? Like, that is what you should be focusing on, right? And then the third mistake that I see people doing all the time is you start copying instead of communicating. So you're looking at what others are doing and you're trying to replicate it without actually considering if it aligns with your brand. So this is often what happens with like trends on social media, or you see that someone else in your industry did this. So why don't we just copy this idea because clearly it worked for them? Just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean it's the right move for you in any aspect of your business, whether that be content or literally anything, right? So some things to think about there. Now, let me give you a little real life scenario. I recently launched and rebranded a local networking group called HP BizLink. Shameless plug, if you're in the Hudson Valley, especially Dutchess County area, you should totally come check out one of our events. But basically, this group soft launched back in October 2024-ish. And there was these three women who had this amazing vision. Like, the vision was there, crystal clear on what they wanted to do, but they struggled to communicate what they were doing and what makes that group so different than all the other networking noise. And so then in around, I want to say January or February of this year of 2025, they brought me on as a fourth founder because they know they needed someone to give this thing legs. They knew they needed someone to help them with the marketing, help them with branding, and help them basically communicate what they're trying to communicate, right? And so that's when the real work started. And now I didn't come into a blank slate here. Like, they did work with a professional designer. They had a professional logo done. They had a marketer help them with their messaging and kind of figure out what their values were and things like that. So they did put the brain chaos on paper. They did do that. But it was very much buried under layers of like corporate jargon, and like their mission was there if you squinted and like read between the lines. But unless you had a heart to heart with these ladies, you did not understand what made this group so special. Because I can say that I was on the phone with one of these ladies and she was telling me everything about what their goal was. And I was like, abso-freaking-lutely, this is right up my alley. I love it. Now, I told them to send me what they had on their brand and all this stuff. And so I took a look at it, and what I read versus what I heard on the phone was not the same group at all. And so that's when I was like, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to rebuild and start from basically ground zero again, because what you're communicating to your audience is not aligned with what's in your brain. It was one of those like classic cases of like, we know what we're doing and we understand what our big term vision is. We understand all these things, but we don't really know how to communicate that in a way that our audience can understand. So I did what I do best, and I basically dug into everything they had. I looked at their vision, goals, current messaging, visual identity, the whole 9 yards. And there was clearly a disconnect between how they talked about themselves versus how they wanted to be seen. And so that energy in person was real, raw, and relatable, but on paper, it was so stiff and so not what they wanted to be. So I completely overhauled their brand strategy, starting with their message. We got clear on who they are, who they serve, how they want to make people feel. We ripped out the jargon, we put their values front and center, and then I started revamping their positioning, their visual identity, and the user experience to match the vibe they're going for. So to give you a little bit of an example to like conceptualize this a little bit, I'm just going to read like their original mission statement. Okay, so it sounded like HV BizLink's core mission is to connect Hudson Valley business owners, fostering a vibrant and supportive community where local entrepreneurs can collaborate, engage, and thrive. The group aims to create a welcoming space that encourages networking, mentorship, and the exchange of ideas. Like, okay, cool. That could literally be any networking group, though. It sounds nice, but it's quite a bit generic, a little vague, and it sounds very corporate sounding. It doesn't sound something fresh and new. It doesn't make anyone feel like anything or give a clear sense as to why this group exists in the first place. So when I reworked it, I changed it into something that felt a little more human and direct. So HV BizLink exists because you deserve better than another evening wasted on a nice to meet you conversation that goes absolutely nowhere. Networking shouldn't feel like a chore. It should be the smartest move you make for your business. Do you see the difference there? One sounds like a committee wrote it, and the other sounds like a real person saying, hey, I know this sucks. Let's fix it. We're here to fix it with you. Now, when you think about your brand, you think about your content and the way that you are showing up for your audience and aligning with how your values reflect what you're doing as a business, it's not just a conversation, because words are nice, but like words without actions, like what is that, right? So I took a good hard look at how they were showing up online, and one of the biggest changes I said that we needed to do was to shut down their Facebook group. And here's why. Because it was basically turning into a dumping ground for random promos, event flyers, and just like the online equivalent of nice to meet you, here's my business card, which is quite literally what we do not want this networking group to be. It's the opposite of what HV BizLink stands for. So how I addressed it is we didn't just hit delete and move on, because again, that's icky. And we knew that there were about like 100 people in this group. So we wanted to give them an explanation of why we were doing this and like why things are changing and how we're evolving as a organization. So when we shut down the Facebook group, the message that I shared with everyone was this: authentic connection is the driving force between everything HV BizLink stands for, in person and online. As Facebook groups are often a dumping ground for buy this or attend this post without ever adding to the conversation, aka the equivalent of shoving unwanted business cards in people's faces at networking events, we've made the decision to pause our Facebook group because we're here to build a community that connects with each other and has meaningful conversations. We want you to get to know your peers. We want you to ask questions. We want you to refer one another and even drop a quick tip, not attached to a sales pitch, that you think the community could benefit from. Those are the conversations that are going to benefit your business, not quick flyer drops to the masses. In addition to that, we want the connections and conversations to be accessible to all. And having these conversations gated between a private group doesn't feel very aligned with our values. That being said, we're building an active Facebook and Instagram page where you'll be able to interact with one another in the comments. Don't worry, there will be designated posts with prompts to get some conversation started, and we'll even include some promotional posts where you'll be invited to drop those flyers. We want our little corner of the internet to be refreshing, enjoyable, and collaborative, just like our in-person events, not a place you post and ghost. So what you can see is like we didn't just say we're shutting down the Facebook group because we didn't want to manage it or we didn't want people to be able to share their businesses. Like that wasn't the purpose. The reason we made this decision was because it's not in alignment with our values. If everything we stand for is collaborative and communication and real conversations and getting to know one another, having a place where you post and ghost, never caring about what other people are posting, never responding to questions, and you're just using it as a self-promotional platform where you're dropping and ditching, you're not welcome here. Sorry, that's kind of like, that is what we stand for. And I'm sure people were like, well, then I'm not contributing, or they were like, this isn't the group for me, because they really did join just to post and ghost. And if that is the case, peace. Like, I'll see you later. You're not part of our community. You're not meant for this, right? But it all comes back to, who are you? Who do you want to be? How do you want your audience to see you? And once you know that, you'll know your voice and visuals, as you can just see in those examples. Knowing your values and knowing these things that you stand for is going to help you in where you're showing up in the first place. Because at surface level, hearing networking group and building a community, a Facebook group sounds like a logical place to be, except for the fact that most Facebook groups need constant moderation. We are all doing this as a volunteer. Like, this is not a money generating business. This is purely just giving a platform for connection. We are not making money from this business. So spending hours of time fielding approvals doesn't make sense. The best way that I can communicate this is that just because other people in your industry or other people doing the things you're doing are doing certain things, it might seem like a good idea. I need you to consider all aspects of why you're going to show up somewhere before you do it. Because again, other networking groups are going to be using Facebook groups, or they're going to be using Slack channels, or they're going to be using circle communities. They're going to be using all of these platforms that exist because they want to interact with the community. But as we are part of a bunch of communities already, we see what happens in these groups, and we don't want that type of conversation to happen. So until our community is refined and people finally understand who we are, what we do, and what we stand for, we're not going to open the floodgates to have all these like infiltrators come in, because we know that that's what is typically associated with networking group or Facebook groups and things like that. So until we have the bandwidth to manage, and until we have the army of community members behind us, essentially, that understand what we are here to do, having a Facebook group doesn't make sense. So these are things to think about when it comes to voice, visuals, and then where you are also showing up. In the same way, once we like refresh that messaging, the way that we are able to promote events becomes easier. So in the beginning, their posts when they're trying to promote an event sounded very clinical, very corporate, very spaces limited, register today, which it did its job. It got people registered for the events, but there was no personality. Anyone could have made that post and nobody would know if it was our group that posted it, somebody else's group that posted it. Like, if somebody read you the post to them, this is how I want you to think about your content. If somebody read your post out loud, would they be able to be like, oh, this is coming from this group, or this business versus this business? There's no way to clearly identify who is writing this content, and like if it feels on brand to whatever you're trying to build. That's a red flag that you probably need to go deeper and rework some things. So instead of just saying register today, space is limited, get in the doors, things like that, now we're promoting our upcoming event, which is a networking bingo. So we're not just saying join us for bingo. We're saying, hey, this isn't your typical bingo night. You're going to be networking, but it's also kind of disguised as a game that gets you to learn more about your peers and have real conversations. Because again, we're infusing that this isn't just an event to throw an event. This is an event to align with our values and meet our audience where they're at and all those things. So the before is you kind of feel like you're being sold to. And then the new version feels like you're being invited to something fun and refreshing. It's a small shift, it really is, but it does make a huge difference in how people perceive the event and whether they actually want to show up and be a part of this. Again, corporate networking group, you would assume like stiff bios and just like gross if we're trying to introduce the founders or introduce sponsors and things like that. But instead, we made it human. We said, hey, financial advisor, an interior designer, photographer, and a brand strategist walk into a bar. Sounds like a bad joke, but it's actually just the dream team behind HV BizLink planning our next event. It's playful, lighthearted, and it makes people feel like they're being introduced to real humans and not just, this is me and my job title, and here's what I do, and here's my fucking business card, give me your money. You know what I mean? Like, there is a very big difference, and that's the difference that we want to make because we didn't like the corporate jargon, right? But anyway, now you can kind of visualize what I'm talking about. So why does all this matter? Because when your brand messaging aligns with your mission, your values, it not only attracts the right people, but it repels the wrong ones. Because I guarantee you, business professionals, because we're targeting business professionals, are reading our posts and going, this is not for me. And good, I don't want you here. If it's not for you, we don't want you there. But if it is for you, come on in. The door is always open, you know? And that's exactly what we want. We don't want everyone to show up to our events. We want the right ones to show up to our events. The people who vibe with our mission are real connections, who are tired of the same old stuffy networking. Those are the people that this business is for. So by leading with our values and being crystal clear about who we are and who we're not, we're building a community of people that want to be part of it. And it's not just because it's just another networking group, but it's because it feels different because it actually is different. And when you apply this principle to your own business, when you get clear on your values, your mission, who you're here to serve, it becomes so much easier to show up consistently without feeling like you're performing or putting on a front. So just that is my little spiel to you today. Just stop making it harder than it has to be. All you have to do is get clear on who you are and communicate that consistently, because that's how you're going to attract the people who get it and the clients that actually want to work with you and that you want to work with. So if you like this episode, hit subscribe, follow me on Instagram. It's panay.marketing. And if you're local to the Hudson Valley, obviously you should come join me at an HV BizLink event. If you didn't get the vibe yet, we're out here building real connections and actually making networking fun again. So see you next time.